LeBron James just walked away from roughly $53 million to go chase one more championship. And honestly, I don't think people are talking enough about what that actually means. Is this the boldest, most self-aware move of his entire career? Or is it the one decision that finally complicates the legacy he spent 23 years building? About $53 million and 8 seasons in Los Angeles. $8 million, a 2-year deal, and a brand new team at 41 years old. That gap isn't really about money. It's about what he's willing to give up for one more shot. Let's get into it. Let's lay out the cold facts first. On July 24, 2026, LeBron James announced he's signing with the Philadelphia 76ers on a 2-year deal worth $8 million, with a player option attached. That's a massive pay cut. He made nearly $53 million with the Lakers just last season. This comes after 8 seasons in Los Angeles, the longest stretch he's ever spent with one franchise. That run ended when the Lakers got swept in the second round by the Thunder, and by James's own account, he genuinely considered walking away from the game entirely afterward. He later said he was pretty sure he'd played his last game, and that he needed real time to figure out what came next. He didn't retire. Instead, he called this his last decision, and picked Philadelphia over reported interest from the Cavaliers, the Heat, the Warriors, and the Timberwolves. Here's what he's walking into. The 76ers already have Joel Embiid at center, Tyrese Maxey running the offense, and Paul George on the wing. This offseason, they also traded for Jaylen Brown from Boston, and reports suggest Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is closing in on a buyout specifically to reunite with James in Philadelphia. On paper, that's one of the most talent-dense rosters in the Eastern Conference. It's also worth noting what James is leaving behind in Los Angeles. The Lakers spent this same offseason reshaping their own roster around Luka Doncic, locking in a sign and trade for center Walker Kessler, re-signing Austin Reeves, and adding pieces like Colin Sexton. In other words, this wasn't James being pushed out of a struggling franchise. The Lakers were already moving in a different direction, building a younger core, and James made his own separate decision to go find a roster built for right now, rather than stick around for a rebuild. The case for why this matters. We will be looking into 3 pillars. Pillar 1, the money he actually gave up. Let's sit with this number, because it's genuinely rare. LeBron James, at 41 years old, took a contract worth roughly $8 million over 2 years, walking away from over $50 million he was making annually with the Lakers. This isn't a player with no other options taking whatever's on the table. This is the NBA's all-time leading scorer, choosing to prioritize a shot at a championship over nearly every dollar he's actually entitled to. That's not a small gesture at this stage of a career. It's about as direct a signal as a player can send about what he's actually chasing at this point. Pillar 2, why Philadelphia? Specifically so why the 76ers, and not a return to Cleveland or Miami, the 2 franchises most tied to his personal story. The answer looks like roster fit. Philadelphia already has Embiid, Maxey, George, and now Brown in place. A genuine core of former All-Stars and All-NBA caliber players. James isn't walking into a rebuild. He's walking into a team that reportedly recruited him specifically because they believed they were close enough to contend that his presence could push them over the top. There's also a personal thread here. Reports out of Philadelphia note that James had already been in contact with Embiid, Maxey, and Brown in the day before this became public, meaning this wasn't a cold business decision made through agents alone. This was James picking a locker room he'd already started building a relationship with. Pillar 3, what this means for his legacy. Conversation. Here's where it gets genuinely complicated, and it's the whole reason this title is a question and not a statement. If James wins a championship in Philadelphia, it adds a 5th ring with a 4th different franchise, a level of adaptability and longevity that no other player in NBA history has matched at this age. It would be, by almost any measure, one of the most remarkable final chapters any athlete has ever written. But if it doesn't work, if Embiid's injury history catches up with the season, if the fit isn't as clean as the roster suggests on paper, if Father Time finally catches up with James at 42, then this move risks being remembered the way some of his earlier team changes were criticized, as another superstar stacking a roster late in his prime, rather than building something from the ground up. That's the tension this whole story sits on. And there's a version of this that's genuinely complicated, no matter what happens on the court. Even NBA analysts covering this signing have pointed out that Embiid remains the face of the Philadelphia franchise, even with Maxey arguably the better player right now. Which tells you this roster already had its own internal hierarchy and identity before James ever arrived. Adding a player of James's stature into that mix isn't automatically seamless, on the court or in the locker room, no matter how much talent is involved. This isn't the first time we've seen an aging superstar take a steep pay cut chasing one more championship. Michael Jordan famously came back to Washington in his 40s for a fraction of his peak earnings, purely to keep playing the game he loved. Though notably, that run never delivered a title. Tim Duncan and Dirk Nowitzki both took below-market deals late in their careers specifically to stay with organizations they trusted. What makes James's version different is the scale of what he's giving up, and the fact that he's doing this on a brand new roster rather than staying put with a franchise he already knows inside and out. That's a bigger leap of faith than most of the comparisons on this list. Jordan's Washington return was mostly about wanting to keep playing. It was never really pitched as a championship pursuit. Duncan and Nowitzki's discounts kept them with teams they'd already won everything with. James is doing something closer to the opposite, leaving the only stable situation he's had in nearly a decade to bet everything on chemistry with players he's never actually played alongside in real NBA games. Now let's be fair here, because there's a real counter-argument to the legacy-cementing framing. First, James has changed teams via free agency 4 times now. Some critics will point out that jumping to an already loaded roster late in his career is a continuation of a pattern he's been criticized for before, going all the way back to his move to Miami. Winning a title by joining a stacked team doesn't carry the same legacy weight, in some eyes, as building one from scratch. Second, Joel Embiid's health has been a persistent question mark for years. Philadelphia's ceiling with this roster depends enormously on Embiid actually staying on the floor for a full season, something that hasn't happened reliably in recent years. If Embiid misses significant time, this entire experiment could fall apart regardless of how much money James gave up. Third, at 41, turning 42 mid-season, James's own health and durability are not guaranteed either. He's defied typical aging curves for years, but every season now genuinely carries more risk than the last. A pay cut doesn't guarantee good health, and it doesn't guarantee chemistry with 4 other ball-dominant, high-usage players either. Fourth, and this is worth sitting with, there's a real question about touches and shots. Maxey, Brown, George, Embiid, and now James are all players who are used to being featured ball-dominant options on their own teams. Fitting 5 players like that into one lineup without stepping on each other's usage is a genuinely difficult basketball problem, and it's one that plenty of star-studded rosters in league history have failed to solve, regardless of how much individual talent was on the floor. But even with all of that said, the size of the financial sacrifice here is real and verifiable. Whatever the outcome on the court, the decision itself tells you clearly where James's priorities are at this stage of his career. Before I get into the long-term verdict, if you're enjoying breakdowns like this, go ahead and hit subscribe. I break down the biggest contracts, trades, and storylines in basketball every single week. Here's how I'd project this forward. 2 years from now, this move is judged almost entirely by one outcome. Does Philadelphia actually win a championship with James on the roster? If it works, if Embiid stays healthy, if the fit between James, Maxey, Brown, George, and Embiid comes together the way the roster suggests it could on paper, this becomes one of the most talked about final chapters in NBA history. A player in his 40s, on his 4th different franchise, taking a massive pay cut, and still finding a way to win it all. That's the kind of story that gets its own documentary someday, and it would genuinely add to his legacy rather than complicate it. If it doesn't work, if health issues derail the season, or if the fit simply isn't as clean as it looks on paper right now, then this risks becoming another chapter in the ongoing debate about James chasing rings on stacked rosters rather than building something on his own. It wouldn't erase what he's already accomplished, but it would give critics a very specific, very recent example to point to. Given the talent already in place in Philadelphia, And given how deliberately James appears to have chosen this specific roster, reportedly reaching out to Embiid, Maxey, and Brown personally before the deal was even announced, I'd lean toward this being a calculated, well-considered bet rather than a desperate one. This wasn't a player scrambling for any available offer. This looks like someone who studied the roster, made calls, and picked his spot on purpose. But the honest answer is that this entire question hinges on health, Embiid's, and James's own, more than it hinges on anything else. Talent alone has never been the question with this Philadelphia core. Availability has. So here's my question for you. If LeBron wins a championship in Philadelphia, does that cement his legacy as the greatest of all time? No debate? Or does joining an already stacked roster at 41 complicate that case, even in victory? Drop your take in the comments. I'll pin the best one. And if you want to see how this Philadelphia chapter actually plays out, make sure you're subscribed, because I'll be tracking this story all season long.